The storm had a cruel kind of rhythm that night. It wasn't just wind and thunder, it was fury, beating against the mountains like a heart that refused to die. Lightning split the sky wide open, flooding the dark stone walls of the royal estate with ghostly light before the shadows swallowed it all again. Somewhere beyond those walls, laughter and music rose rich, golden, and cruelly indifferent. Inside, the ballroom gleamed. Outside, where the torches struggled against the storm, a girl stood alone. Lyra. She didn't belong there. And she knew it. Her dress wasn't silk. It was a hand-me-down, threadbare at the seams, soaked from the rain. Her boots left small muddy prints across the marble floor, a quiet rebellion against the perfection inside. She stood just beyond the light, close enough to see them dance, far enough to pretend she didn't care. But she cared. She cared so much it hurt to breathe. The scent of roasted venison and honeyed wine drifted out through the open doors, mingling with the wild tang of storm air. Laughter echoed, sharp as glass. The nobles glided beneath chandeliers dripping with crystal and pride, every motion deliberate, every glance heavy with judgment and power. And there she was, the forgotten one. The girl the pack had once cast out. She didn't come to be seen. She came because something inside her had whispered, "Go." Something deeper than logic. Older than fear. That voice, low, female, and wild, had been growing louder these past few nights, whispering through her dreams, curling around her heartbeat. And tonight, under this storm, it refused to be silent. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of the doorway. Through the blur of candlelight and movement, she caught sight of him. The Alpha King. Kale. Even from a distance, his presence hit her like a strike of lightning. Tall. Still. Watchful. His dark hair gleamed where it caught the light. His expression was carved from shadow, unreadable, dangerous. Every other man in that room deferred to him, though he barely moved. He didn't need to. Power radiated from him in invisible waves, quiet, commanding, absolute. She told herself she wasn't staring, but her eyes disobeyed. There was something magnetic about him, something her instincts recognized before her mind could argue. She looked away too late. Because he looked back. For a fraction of a second, his gaze caught hers. And in that moment, it felt like the entire room fell away. No laughter. No music. Just that look, sharp, knowing, impossibly calm. Her heart tripped. She ducked into the shadows, breath quick. What was she thinking, coming here? This was a royal wedding feast, a celebration for the bonded pairs, the elites, the purebloods. People like her didn't exist in their world anymore. She was nothing but a ghost they'd tried to erase. But ghosts have a habit of returning. Thunder cracked again, shaking the chandeliers above the dance floor. For a heartbeat, the lights flickered just enough to make the crowd gasp, enough for Lyra to feel that whisper again, curling through her chest like smoke. He's here. The voice inside her wasn't her own. It was something older and ancient, as if the storm itself had borrowed her bones to speak. She pressed a trembling hand to her heart. Not now, she mouthed under her breath. The warmth spread anyway, that silver flicker she couldn't control. It pulsed in her veins like wild firelight. She could hide from everyone but herself. And then the music stopped. A scream pierced the air, sharp, sudden, real. The crowd froze. The doors burst open at the far end of the hall, and in poured the Chaos Warriors in torn armor, the smell of blood clinging to them. Rogues, someone shouted. In an instant, the wedding feast turned to panic. Chairs crashed, silk gowns tore, the crowd split in waves of fear. Lyra's first instinct was to run. Her second was to stay. She pressed herself against the cold marble pillar as guards rushed past, blades drawn, shouting orders. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the scent of steel and wolf. She heard the growl before she saw it, low, guttural, rolling like thunder through the corridor. Then movement. Two massive wolves collided in the courtyard beyond the glass walls, their eyes glowing amber and crimson in the lightning flashes. Her breath caught. The wild part of her, the part she'd tried to bury for years, recognized the sound, the rhythm, the pull of the fight. Her pulse mirrored theirs, each beat of her heart syncing with the savage music outside. And then, chaos swept inward. A figure stumbled through the doorway, a soldier, bleeding. He fell hard, crashing into the table beside her. The sharp scent of blood filled the air. Before she could move, another body collided into her shoulder, shoving her hard against the column. Pain flared white-hot, sharp. Her breath hitched, and she clutched her arm. Blood. Just a shallow cut, but enough to sting her pride more than her flesh. Out of the way, someone barked. She ducked down, heart pounding, as boots thundered past her. A broken piece of glass skittered across the marble beside her hand. She wanted to vanish. But the moment she tried to retreat deeper into the shadows, a pair of eyes caught hers again this time, much closer. Not Kale's. A guard. He froze when he saw her, not because she was hurt, but because he recognized her face. The mark of the exile. "What are you doing here?" he snarled, stepping closer. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. She opened her mouth and no sound came out. He reached for her arm. Her instincts screamed. And then a voice cut through the chaos. Low. Commanding. "Leave her." The guard froze mid-motion. Every muscle in his body obeyed before his mind even registered the order. He turned slowly. Kale stood there, framed by firelight and thunder, a shadow more dangerous than any rogue wolf outside. His expression was unreadable, his tone too calm. "Go," he said again. The guard stammered, bowed, and disappeared. For a heartbeat, it was just the two of them. Lyra's breath came in shallow bursts. She felt the blood trickle down her arm, warm against her cold skin. The storm outside roared louder, as if echoing her panic. Kale stepped closer slowly, deliberately, the way predators move when they're certain of their prey. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Not bright, just enough to remind her what he was. For a second, she forgot how to breathe. He stopped just close enough for her to feel the heat of him, even through the air charged with lightning. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. His voice wasn't harsh. It wasn't gentle either. It was something else, heavy, layered with something unspoken. Lyra swallowed hard. I know." He tilted his head slightly, as if studying her. "And yet you are." The words hit deeper than they should have. Because he was right. She was there. And even she didn't know why. Something inside her, that same ancient whisper, pulsed again. "Because you belong here." But she couldn't say that aloud. She pressed her bleeding arm against her chest and looked away. "I'll go." He didn't move to stop her. But his voice followed her as she turned. "No, you won't." "Not yet." That stopped her. She turned back, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Why?" His gaze swept over the chaos behind her, the panicked nobles, the frightened servants, the shattered perfection of the wedding feast. "Because if they see you now," he said softly, "they'll tear you apart before you reach the door." A chill rippled through her. He wasn't exaggerating. She'd seen the way the others looked at her, fear disguised as contempt. He glanced toward the open ballroom, where whispers were already forming like smoke. Then, without warning, he took a step forward, closing the space between them completely. His hand brushed her arm, not roughly, but firmly, pulling her slightly into the shadow beside him. The touch burned. Not painful, but enough to send a shock through her, heat chasing the chill. When he spoke again, his voice was low, meant for her alone. "Act like you're with me." Those words shouldn't have meant anything. But they did. Because in this place, in this world, standing beside the Alpha King wasn't just protection. It was possession. It was power. And for the first time that night, the storm outside wasn't the only thing roaring. Her heartbeat drowned out everything else. She looked up, meeting his gaze, and found no mockery there, no pity. Just intent. Unshakable, unflinching intent. Lightning flared again, painting them in cold white light. His expression didn't change. The whispers began to spread through the hall. "Who is she? Why is the king touching her?" Lyra wanted to shrink, to disappear. But his hand tightened slightly around hers, just enough to anchor her. And then he turned not away, but toward the stunned crowd and spoke with quiet authority. "She's with me." Those 3 words silenced the room. Every noble, every warrior, every curious eye turned toward them. The music had stopped long ago, but the silence that followed now felt heavier than thunder. Lyra could feel her pulse everywhere in her throat, her wrists, the tips of her fingers. The warmth of his hand seeped into her skin, steady and grounding. She didn't understand why he'd protect her, why he'd risk his reputation for a stranger. But at that moment, none of it mattered. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. For the first time, the world saw her and she wasn't alone. Her gaze flickered up toward his again, searching for meaning. Cale didn't look back. His focus was already on the storm outside, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. But she caught the faintest hint of something, a shadow of emotion behind his calm. Recognition. Maybe even regret. The hall trembled again as another boom of thunder rolled over the mountains. The scent of blood was everywhere. The chaos outside hadn't stopped, it was only getting closer. She could feel the pull in her veins, the echo of something old and wild. The part of her she'd buried screamed to be set free. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless, hungry, alive. She clenched her jaw, forcing it down, choking back the growl that threatened to escape. Not here. Not now. They'd kill her for it. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Something had changed tonight. Something irreversible. As the Alpha King stood beside her, a stranger, a savior, a storm of his own, Lyra felt the truth bloom like fire beneath her ribs. The world she'd run from had finally found her. And whatever came next, she wouldn't be able to hide from it anymore. If your heart's already racing, if you feel that pull between fear and fate, hit subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every heartbeat tells a story. The ballroom had fallen into that strange kind of silence that hums with danger, too quiet, too alert, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lyra could still feel the echo of his words inside her chest. She's with me. It wasn't a sentence. It was a command. And somehow it carried the weight of protection and promise at once. The nobles froze mid-movement, faces shifting between shock and calculation. They didn't dare question the Alpha King aloud, but their eyes did, sharp, slicing, full of disbelief. A few lowered their heads out of respect. Others turned away, whispering like dry leaves in wind. Cale ignored them all. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that demanded obedience without ever asking for it. Even the storm outside seemed to pause when he stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the sea of eyes. The torches flickered along the stone walls, and for a moment the two of them stood at the center of everything light, darkness, and every secret space in between. Lyra's heart was still racing, each beat loud enough to betray her confusion. She couldn't decide if she wanted to thank him or run. The air around him was heavy, charged with that low, wild energy that only alphas carried, something ancient and territorial. It pressed against her senses until she could barely tell if her pulse belonged to her or to the storm itself. He didn't look at her right away. His gaze swept over the crowd instead, sharp as a blade drawn in silence. One by one, the staring nobles found other things to do to avoid meeting the king's eyes. Only when the whispers had faded did he turn to her. "You're bleeding." Lyra blinked, almost startled by the sound of his voice up close. It was quieter than she expected, rough at the edges, but steady like stone weathered by centuries of rain. She glanced down at her arm, at the thin line of red soaking into the fabric. "It's nothing," she muttered. His expression didn't change. "You should have it looked at." "I said it's fine." There was a pause just long enough for her to realize she'd spoken to him the way no one else in this kingdom dared to. The flicker of amusement that crossed his eyes might have been real, or maybe she imagined it. He didn't press the matter. Instead, he stepped slightly to the side, using his body as a barrier as another wave of movement rippled through the hall. Servants hurried to restore order. Guards closed the doors against the storm. The musicians stood frozen, instruments clutched to their chests, waiting for permission to breathe again. But all Lyra could see was him, this man who had just rewritten her place in the world with 4 words. She whispered, "Why would you do that?" His answer came without hesitation. Because they would have devoured you if I didn't. That's not protection, she said softly. That's ownership. His eyes shifted to hers, the faintest glimmer of curiosity breaking through the mask of control. Is that what you think I did? She wanted to say yes. She wanted to keep the anger sharp so she wouldn't have to admit the truth that a small, traitorous part of her had felt safe the moment he spoke. Safe, for the first time in years. But she couldn't find the words. Instead, she looked past him, toward the doors that still shook under the wind. Lightning flashed again, bright enough to illuminate the smears of blood on the marble. The rogues were still out there. She could feel the wrongness in the air, the low hum of danger vibrating through her bones. Cale felt it too. His shoulders straightened, his attention shifting to the far end of the hall. The muscles in his jaw tensed as he listened to something beyond mortal hearing. Then, almost under his breath, he said, "They'll try again." Lyra frowned. Who? He didn't answer right away. His gaze flicked to her, assessing, as if measuring whether she could handle the truth. Then, the ones who want the throne. They sent wolves tonight. Her stomach turned cold. You think they came for you? He shook his head once. No. For whoever the prophecy says will stand beside me. That made no sense. Prophecy? Before he could reply, one of his guards approached, bowing low. Your Majesty, the outer gates are secure. No further intruders. Cale nodded, his expression unreadable. Good. Keep the nobles inside until dawn. The guard hesitated, eyes darting to Lyra. And the girls, sire? The room seemed to tilt for a moment. Lyra braced herself for the word arrest or remove. Instead, Cale's answer came cool and final. She stays. The guard bowed again, unsure whether to be relieved or terrified, and vanished into the crowd. Lyra felt the weight of 100 eyes on her again, but forced herself to stay still. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. Yet when Cale looked back at her, there was something steady in his gaze that pinned her to the spot. Not dominance this time. Something quieter. Recognition. Come with me, he said. She didn't move. Why? Because it isn't safe here. It's not safe anywhere, she murmured. He studied her for a long moment, then turned toward a narrow passage that led away from the grand hall. He didn't wait to see if she followed. He didn't have to. Something in his tone, the quiet certainty of command, drew her after him before her mind could argue. They walked in silence through a corridor lined with portraits of kings long dead. Their eyes seemed to follow her, accusing, curious. The echo of her footsteps mixed with the storm outside. Somewhere far below, she could still hear the distant howls of wolves, carried up through the stone. Cale stopped before a heavy wooden door and pushed it open. Warm light spilled from inside, painting the hallway in soft gold. The room beyond was smaller than she expected, a private chamber, not the opulent space of a ruler, but something lived in. Books stacked on tables, maps unfurled across the walls, a faint scent of cedar smoke in the air. He motioned for her to enter. She hesitated at the threshold. Go on, he said. No one will follow you here. She stepped inside, the door closing quietly behind them. The sudden calm felt unreal after the chaos of the hall. For the first time, she could breathe. Cale walked to the hearth and added another log to the fire. The flames caught quickly, throwing light across his face. It softened the sharpness of his features just enough for her to see the exhaustion hiding beneath the control. He said, without turning, you shouldn't have been there tonight. Lyra bristled. I didn't plan to be. I just needed to see it. The wedding feast? She nodded. All of them. The pacts, the power, the order of it all. I wanted to remember what it felt like to belong somewhere. That last word hung in the air, fragile and honest. Cale faced her fully now. You were exiled. Her breath caught. You know who I am? I know what you are, he said quietly. The others may have forgotten your name, but I remember. The fire cracked. Shadows danced across the walls. Lyra stared at him, trying to read the meaning behind those words. Then you know why they cast me out. He nodded once. You lost control. She flinched at the memory of the screams, the flames, the smell of burning earth. I was a child. I know. The simplicity of his response disarmed her more than any argument could. No judgment. No accusation. Just a statement, heavy with understanding. For a moment, silence filled the room again, thick, almost gentle. The only sound was the rain against the windows. Lyra looked into the fire, her voice small. They said I was cursed. Cale's tone stayed calm. They were afraid. Of me. Of what they couldn't control, he corrected. The words sank deep, unsettling and oddly comforting all at once. She risked a glance at him. And you're not afraid? He met her gaze steadily. I've seen fear. You don't look like it. Something in her chest loosened at that, a knot she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for years. She exhaled slowly. But then the question that had been pressing at the edge of her mind broke free. You said you remember me. How? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the window and looked out at the lightning flashing over the mountains. His reflection flickered in the glass, strong, distant, haunted. When I was younger, he said finally, my pack went to war in the Eastern Valley. I saw a girl there half-shifted, standing in the middle of a burning field. Everyone around her was running, but she wasn't. She was crying. Not because of the fire, but because she couldn't stop it. Lyra's breath caught. The memory slammed into her like cold water. She hadn't known anyone had seen that night. She thought the flames had hidden her shame completely. That was you, she whispered. He nodded once. That was you. The silence that followed was thick with old ghosts. Lyra pressed a hand against her ribs, as if to steady herself. So that's why you helped me. Because you pity me. Cale turned sharply. No. The word carried an edge that made her look up. His expression was harder now, eyes darker. I don't pity you, Lyra. I respect what survives. The way he said her name made the air feel heavier. Until that moment, she hadn't realized he'd never spoken it aloud before. Hearing it from him felt like an invocation, quiet, deliberate, dangerous. Before she could respond, a sudden roar of thunder shook the castle, making the flames leap higher. Cale moved to the door, listening again to something distant. The rogues are retreating, he said, more to himself than to her. Lyra took a slow step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. You said they came for the one who would stand beside you. Do you think that's me? His hand rested on the doorframe. For a moment he didn't answer. Then he turned back to her, the firelight catching in his eyes like molten gold. I think, he said softly, that the storm outside isn't the one we should fear. And just like that, she understood what he meant. The danger wasn't out there. It was here in this quiet room, in the space between his voice and her heartbeat. Because whatever had begun tonight, the choice he'd made, the bond neither of them could name, was already rewriting both their fates. The thunder rolled again, distant now, fading into the mountains. The castle exhaled with it, the walls settling, the night slowly finding its rhythm once more. Cale looked toward the fire, then back to her. Rest for tonight. Tomorrow we talk. She hesitated, unsure whether to trust him, unsure why she wanted to. But something deep inside her, something older than logic, whispered that running now would be the same as surrendering. So she nodded. Just for tonight. He inclined his head in acknowledgement, then left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Lyra stood alone, the storm of fading heartbeat against the windows. She stared into the fire, feeling its warmth reach for her like an old friend. The events of the night played back in fragments, the fear, the chaos, the way his hand had anchored hers in the middle of it all. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. The whisper inside her, the one she'd spent years trying to silence, stirred again, gentle now, almost tender. He saw you. She closed her eyes, unsure whether that thought terrified or comforted her. Maybe both. Outside, the last rumble of thunder slipped into silence, leaving only the slow crackle of fire and the soft rhythm of her breathing. Somewhere in the depths of the castle, the Alpha King walked alone through the echoing corridors, the weight of prophecy and storm heavy on his shoulders. And though neither of them could see it yet, the path that bound their fates had already begun to glow silver, wild, and unstoppable. If your pulse hasn't slowed since the storm began, you're not alone. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every shadow hides a heartbeat and every story dares to bite back. Dawn never truly touched the mountain estate. The light that filtered through its high windows came thin and ghost-like, pale against the stone as if even the sun was hesitant to trespass here. Lyra hadn't slept. She sat near the hearth long after the fire had quieted to embers, tracing the faint scars on her wrist with absent fingers. Every mark carried a story she didn't dare tell. Every flicker of flame reminded her of the night her world had turned to ash. When she finally rose, her reflection in the window startled her. The girl who stared back didn't look like the one she remembered. The soot, the exhaustion, the weary eyes, none of it belonged to the child she'd once been. That child had loved too easily, believed too deeply, thought the world could be kind. That child had burned for it. By the time the knock came, she already knew who it was. Cale didn't need to announce himself. His presence filled the air before he entered. The door opened and morning light followed him in sharp, uninvited. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at her, studying the shadows under her eyes, the way her shoulders stayed tense even when she stood still. "You didn't rest," he said finally. She turned back toward the window. "Couldn't. Because you don't trust me?" Lyra's voice was soft. "Because I don't trust anyone." A pause. "Fair." The word landed heavier than she expected. He crossed the room, stopping a few feet away. His movements were quiet, deliberate, always as if the air itself bent to make space for him. He placed something on the table between them. A simple tray, bread, fruit, a mug of steaming tea. "You should eat." She didn't move. "I'm not hungry." His gaze flicked up, calm but unyielding. That wasn't a request. Something in her bristled. "You think being king means I'll obey you?" "No," he said, voice low, steady. "I think being alive means you should eat." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It felt suspended, like both were waiting for something to shift. Eventually, she gave in more from exhaustion than agreement. She sat, tearing a piece of bread without meeting his eyes. He didn't sit, just leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed, watching her with that quiet intensity that made her pulse stumble. "You said last night you wanted to remember what it felt like to belong," he murmured. "Who took that from you?" The question hit harder than it should have. Lyra swallowed, the taste of memory sharper than any food. "My pack." "Why?" Her throat tightened. She hadn't spoken of it in years. Not aloud. Not even to herself. But something about his voice, low, patient, almost too still, pulled the truth from her before she could stop it. "They said my blood was wrong." "Wrong?" She nodded, staring into her hands. "My mother, she wasn't one of them. She came from another line. A line that wasn't supposed to exist." Cale's expression didn't change, but his energy did something darker and stirred behind his calm. "What line?" Lyra hesitated. "The Shadowborn." That word filled the space like a curse. Even the fire crackled in protest. Cale straightened, his eyes narrowing slightly. "That blood hasn't been seen in centuries." "I know." Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "When they found out, they called it a corruption. Said no pure wolf should carry it. They said it was why the fire came." "The night you shifted," Cale murmured. She nodded. "I didn't know what was happening. It was the full moon. I remember pain, bones breaking, blood roaring in my ears, and then heat. Everywhere. I could feel everything burning, even before I saw it. My village, the trees, my home." Her words broke. The sound of them was too heavy, too old. "They called it punishment. Said I'd brought ruin on them all." She lifted her head, meeting his gaze. "They hunted me that night. My own pack." Cale's jaw tightened, his eyes glinting like iron. "You were a child." "They didn't care." Silence fell again, the kind that carried more truth than words. Outside, wind moved through the mountain pines, whispering like ghosts. Cale finally spoke, quiet but firm. "Shadowborn aren't cursed, Lyra. They're rare. Different, yes. But that power comes from the first wolves, the ones who could command both fire and spirit." She laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the ashes of my village." His eyes softened, only slightly. Power frightens those who don't have it. You didn't destroy your home. Fear did. For a heartbeat, she wanted to believe him. But belief was a luxury she'd long since abandoned. She pushed away from the table, pacing toward the hearth. You think saying that changes anything? Every place I've gone, every face I've seen, it's the same. They smell it on me. The wrongness. Kale watched her in silence, his expression unreadable. You think I don't know what it's like to be feared? She turned sharply. You're the Alpha King. You rule them all. And before that? His voice cut through the air like a quiet blade. Before the crown, before the title, what do you think they called me? Her breath hitched. She hadn't thought about that. He stepped closer, and for the first time, she saw something raw behind his composure. They called me a beast that shouldn't lead. Said I was born too ruthless, too wild. Said my father's death was proof that I'd bring ruin to the throne. Lyra's anger faltered. What did you do? I proved them right, he said softly. The admission carried no pride, no regret, just truth. She studied him, the weight of understanding settling between them. Different scars, same wound. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. Kale's gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. You hide because they made you believe your power is something to be buried. I lead because I learned to make mine obey. But neither of us is free. Her pulse stumbled. And you think that's something we share? I think it's the only thing that matters. The firelight flickered, stretching shadows across their faces. For a moment, neither moved. Then he turned slightly, gesturing toward a second door at the back of the chamber. There's a room there. You'll stay until the storm passes. I can find somewhere else. His tone darkened. There is nowhere else. She hesitated, her pride warring with exhaustion. You don't even know me. Kale's eyes didn't waver. I know enough. Something in his voice broke through her defenses, steady, grounded, final. She wanted to argue, to cling to the safety of distance, but the truth was simpler. She was tired. Tired of running. Tired of pretending she wasn't cold. So she nodded, barely. Kale gave a single approving nod in return, then stepped back toward the window. You can rest. I'll have someone bring more food. Lyra turned toward the adjoining room, but before she disappeared through the doorway, his voice stopped her. Lyra. She looked back. Whatever they told you, he said quietly, about your blood, don't let it define you. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly her chest ached. But belief, again, was dangerous. So she just said, "Good night, Your Majesty." The door closed behind her. That night, the storm returned not outside, but within. Sleep refused her. She lay on the bed in the dark, the firelight from the main room spilling faintly through the cracks of the door. Every sound was louder in the quiet, the drip of rain, the low sigh of the wind, her own heartbeat echoing like footsteps in a long corridor. And beneath it all, the whisper of her other self, the wolf. It had been silent for years, buried under guilt and fear. But now it stirred, restless, as if the presence of the Alpha King had woken something ancient inside her. You can't hide forever, it murmured in her mind. She clenched her fists. I'm not hiding. You are, the voice answered, softer this time. And you're tired of it. Tears burned at the edges of her eyes. She hated how true that felt. She had spent years shrinking herself down, pretending to be harmless, to be normal. But she wasn't. She never would be. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't the curse she'd been told it was. Outside, a wolf howled a long, mournful sound that carried across the valley and up the mountain. Lyra sat up, her chest tightening. There was something in that cry, something familiar, almost calling. For a fleeting second, she imagined running with it. The cold air biting her skin, the ground alive beneath her feet, the moon above a silver witness to her freedom. Her breath trembled as she whispered to the darkness, one day. And somewhere beyond the storm, the echo of the Alpha's heartbeat matched her own. If you've ever felt like the world tried to dim your fire, you'll understand Lyra's fight. Stay close, the storm is far from over. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every scar tells a story, and every story runs wild beneath the moon. Morning arrived slow and uncertain, as if even the sun wasn't sure it should touch the world that had survived the night. The rain had passed, leaving the mountain shrouded in pale mist. Every branch glittered with drops of silver light, and the air smelled clean, like earth reborn after ruin. Lyra woke before the dawn bell, her dreams still tangled in whispers. In them, fire had turned to light, and shadows had taken shape with voices that called her name. She remembered the sound low, ancient, like the heartbeat of something too vast to understand. Now, sitting at the edge of the bed, she tried to shake it off. But the feeling lingered that something unseen had begun to move. When she opened the door, Cale was already there. He didn't look surprised to see her awake. "The storm's broken," he said quietly. "There's something I want you to see." She hesitated. "Now." He nodded once. "Now." The castle's halls stretched long and cold, their stone walls carved with wolves in flight, crescent moons, and ancient runes that pulsed faintly when they passed. Torches flickered in their sconces, throwing restless light across Cale's shoulders as he walked ahead, tall, steady, impossible to read. Lyra followed, her bare feet silent on the marble. The further they went, the colder it became, not the chill of the mountain, but something deeper, older. Finally, Cale stopped before a great wooden door bound in iron. The carvings were unfamiliar, a spiral surrounded by wolves, their eyes inlaid with silver. "This is the Hall of First Flame," Cale said. "Few are allowed inside." "Then why bring me?" she asked, cautious. His gaze met hers, steady, searching. "Because I think it's time you see what they feared." He pushed open the door. The air that met her was thick and ancient. The chamber beyond was vast, a cavern of stone and shadow, lit by a single thread of fire suspended in the air like a living ribbon. The flame didn't burn red or orange. It shimmered with hues of silver and white, as if moonlight itself had been set ablaze. Lyra's breath caught. "What is this?" "The heart of our beginning," Cale said softly. "They say it's the spark left behind by the first wolf, the one who birthed the bloodlines." She stepped closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. The flame pulsed as she approached, responding to her presence. For an instant, it flared brighter, and faint whispers filled the chamber, not words, but echoes, memories. Cale's eyes narrowed. "It reacts to you." "I didn't do anything." "You don't have to," he murmured. "It knows you." Lyra turned sharply to him, her pulse quickening. "How can it know me?" He didn't answer right away. He just watched her, the way the silver light touched her hair, the faint shimmer on her skin. "There's a story," he said finally. "An old one. About a child born under the wolf eclipse, the only time when moonlight and fire meet. It said that child would carry both the curse and the cure of the bloodlines." Lyra frowned. "You think that's me?" Cale's silence was answer enough. She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You sound like them. Like the elders who said my birth was an omen." "Maybe it was," he said, voice low. "But not the kind they feared." Lyra stepped back, shaking her head. "You don't understand. My power doesn't save. It destroys. Every time I've tried to use it." "The village burned," Cale finished quietly. Her throat tightened. He stepped closer, his tone gentle but firm. "You said you felt everything burning. Did you ever wonder if it was the fire trying to protect you?" She blinked, startled. "Protect me?" Cale's gaze didn't waver. "Power responds to the heart. And yours has been running from itself for too long." She wanted to argue, to retreat into the safety of disbelief, but the flame pulsed again, brighter, almost as if agreeing with him. Its light rippled across the chamber walls, illuminating old carvings she hadn't noticed before. Lyra turned. The symbols formed a circle, wolves kneeling around a single figure cloaked in fire. Beneath it, an inscription in the old tongue glowed faintly. "She who carries both light and ruin shall awaken the dawn." Her voice trembled. "Awaken the dawn." "It means balance," Cale said quietly. "The first wolf created both destruction and renewal." "They're not opposites, Lyra. They're the same breath." She stood there, silent, the truth sinking in like cold water. For the first time, she didn't feel only fear at the thought of her power. There was something else beneath it, something steady and strong, like a rhythm she'd always known but never dared to follow. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Cale's eyes softened, just slightly. Because the prophecy is stirring again. My seers dream of flame and shadow walking the same path. And because the moment you stepped into that hall last night, every elder in this place felt the air shift. Her pulse thudded in her ears. You think I'm some prophecy come to life? He took another step toward her, his presence filling the air between them. I think you're proof that fate doesn't care about bloodlines. That maybe everything we've been told, about purity, about danger, was just fear wearing the mask of tradition. Lyra looked up at him, eyes bright in the firelight. And what if they're right? What if I lose control again? What if the fire inside me? Then I'll stop you, Kale said simply. Her breath caught. You sound certain. I have to be. There was no arrogance in his voice, only conviction, quiet, unshakable. The kind that could anchor a world unraveling. The flame flared once more, and for a heartbeat, the chamber was flooded with light. Lyra gasped. In that brightness, she saw flashes not of memory, but of something yet to come. Wolves running beneath a blood-red moon. A crown shattered. Her own hands, glowing with silver fire. Then it was gone. She stumbled back, breath trembling. What was that? Kale's jaw tightened. A glimpse. The flame shows what could be. But not all visions are meant to be trusted. Lyra pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the echo of heat beneath her skin. It felt real. Prophecy always does, he murmured. They left the chamber in silence, but something between them had shifted. The air felt charged, fragile, yet alive. As they walked through the misty corridors, Lyra caught fragments of her reflection in the windows. The same girl, but somehow different. The fear was still there, yes, but beside it now burned something fiercer. Kale walked slightly ahead, but his voice carried back to her, quiet and certain. The council will sense it soon. They'll start asking questions. Be ready. For what? For them to fear you. Lyra almost smiled. I'm used to that. No, he said, glancing back, eyes glinting like stormlight. Not like this. This time, they'll have reason to. That night, Lyra stood alone on the terrace, the sky spread wide above her. The moon hung low, swollen and watchful. She could still feel the echo of that silver flame inside her, faint, but pulsing like a heartbeat that wasn't entirely her own. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. But it didn't sound like mourning this time. It sounded like a promise. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like running. She closed her eyes and whispered to the wind, "If destiny's coming for me, then let it come." The wind answered in a low, ancient hum. And far below, in the hall of first flame, the silver fire stirred again, brighter than before, reaching toward the night sky, as if it, too, had been waiting for her to stop hiding. Some destinies burn too bright to stay buried. If you can feel that fire, that hunger to rise after being cast aside, then stay with us. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where legends awaken under the same moon that watches you tonight. The calm didn't last. Peace never did in a place built on fear. 3 days after the flame's awakening, the mountain estate stirred like a nest of restless wolves. The council had arrived, 12 elders cloaked in silver and authority, their presence heavy as storm clouds. Lyra felt it the moment she stepped into the grand hall. Every eye turned. Every whisper carried her name like poison on the wind. The scent of judgment was stronger than blood. Kale stood at the head of the chamber, tall and unreadable. His voice cut through the murmurs like iron. You're gathered here because the flame has answered again. You all felt it. One of the elders, an old wolf named Corin, stepped forward. His hair was white, his eyes sharp with suspicion. We felt something, yes. But the question is, why? And what sin has awakened at this time? Lyra's heart stuttered. Sin. That word again. Always the first blade they reached for. Kale's gaze hardened. You call it sin because you don't understand it. Corin's voice rose, steady but cold. You've led a stranger near the Hall of Flame, a girl with no lineage, no loyalty to this throne. And now the ancient fire stirs? You expect us to see coincidence. Every word was a dagger meant for her. Lyra stood near the wall, trying to seem small, unseen. But she could feel it, their attention crawling over her skin like frost. Kale didn't move. The flame responds to power, not permission. And it chose her. The hall erupted in argument. Voices rose, accusations hissed, hands slammed against the table. Lyra's pulse pounded in her ears. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to move. Until Corin turned to her directly. "You," he spat, pointing a trembling finger. "What are you?" Lyra's breath caught. Cale growled low, warning him. But the elder pressed on. "Answer me. What curse have you brought here? Who sent you?" The fire inside her chest flared. The room seemed to tilt. For a heartbeat, she saw flashes, the burning village, her mother's scream, the wolves who hunted her. The same eyes now staring at her again. "I didn't bring anything," she said quietly. "You did. The moment you chose fear over truth." The words slipped out before she could stop them. A gasp rippled through the council. Cale's eyes flicked toward her, and she could almost hear what he didn't say. "Be careful." But it was too late. Corin sneered. Defiant too. Just like the last of her kind. "What do you mean?" Cale demanded, his tone darkening. The elder's gaze was sharp with accusation. "You think we don't recognize that scent? The girl reeks of shadow fire. She's Shadowborn, the same bloodline that nearly destroyed the North centuries ago." The room fell silent. Lyra's hands shook, but she kept her head high. "If you already know who I am, then say it plainly." Corin's voice trembled with fury. "You are a threat to every living wolf in this realm." And that was all it took. The guards moved before Cale could stop them. For Wolf stepped forward, shifting partially, claws lengthening, eyes glowing. Cale's power surged through the hall like thunder. "Stand down." But the old fear ran deeper than his command. The guards hesitated, caught between instinct and obedience. Lyra backed away, pulse roaring in her ears. The heat in her chest was building again, clawing to be released. The flame she'd tried to bury was rising, alive, trembling beneath her skin. "Cale," she whispered, voice cracking. "I can't." "I know," he said, moving toward her slowly, carefully. "Look at me." His voice was calm, steady, meant to anchor her. But behind him, chaos unfurled, shouting, the scrape of metal, the tremor of power. Lyra's hands glowed faintly, silver threads spiraling across her fingers. The air shimmered with heat. "Don't fight it," Cale murmured. "Control it." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do. You always did." The words found her deeper than her fear, deeper than memory. She reached inward, toward the wild, burning pulse that had haunted her since birth. The flame roared, but this time, she didn't run from it. She breathed it. And the hall exploded with light. The torches flared white, banners caught fire, and every wolf in the chamber dropped to one knee, shielding their eyes. The flames didn't burn, they blazed around her like living armor. When the light faded, Lyra stood in the center, untouched. Her hands shimmered with silver fire that slowly dimmed back into skin. The council stared in stunned silence. Cale exhaled slowly. Enough. He turned to the elders, voice cutting through the smoke. "You call her cursed. I call her chosen. The flame has spoken, and it does not kneel to your fear." Corin's eyes burned with rage, but he said nothing. Cale looked back at Lyra. For a moment, the Alpha King and the outcast girl stood facing one another through the haze of smoke and ash, equals, bound not by blood, but by defiance. Her heart thundered. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "What?" "Defended me. They'll turn on you next." He smiled faintly, the kind that never reached his eyes. "Let them try." That night, the castle held its breath. The council had dispersed, but the air was still charged with unspoken threats. Wolves patrolled the corridors, their eyes sharp, their steps quick. Lyra couldn't sleep. She wandered to the balcony, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. Below, the valley spread wide and dark, dotted with torchlight, watchfires burning in uneasy circles. She knew this feeling too well. The calm before a hunt. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned, expecting a guard, but it was Cale. He leaned against the railing beside her, silent for a moment. Then, quietly, "You did well today." Lyra almost laughed. "I nearly burned the council alive." "And yet," he said, glancing at her, "they're still breathing." She looked out at the horizon again, the faint shimmer of moonlight brushing the mountains. They'll come for me. Then they'll have to get through me first. His words were simple, but they sank deep. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever stood with her, not when the world turned its claws. She turned to face him. Why are you doing this, Kale? You don't even know what I am. He held her gaze, his expression unreadable but soft around the edges. Maybe I don't need to. She swallowed hard, her voice low. You should be careful. I've brought ruin before. Kale's tone darkened, quiet but resolute. Then let me be the one who teaches you how not to. For a heartbeat, the world felt suspended again. The moonlight caught between them, the tension stretching thin but steady. Below, the wolves howled once more. But this time, it wasn't fear that answered. It was promise. And deep within the castle walls, hidden behind stone and silence, an unseen force began to stir, something older than prophecy, older than flame. Something that had waited centuries for its heir to rise. If your heart's still racing, you've already chosen your side. Stay with us, the storm is far from over. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every heartbeat hides a story, and every story burns brighter beneath the moon. The night was thick with mist, curling around the stone terraces of the mountain estate like living fingers. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in every gust, every chill that whispered through the castle corridors. Lyra walked alone, hands brushing against the cold railing, trying to steady her racing heart. The events of the day had left her exhausted every moment, every glare from the council, every hiss of disapproval weighed on her chest like stones. She thought she would find solitude in the quiet night, yet she felt watched, as if the shadows themselves had eyes. A voice broke through the silence, low and steady. You shouldn't be out, H. She turned to see Kale stepping from the mist, his coat brushing the stone, his presence impossible to ignore. Even in the dim light, he was tall, immovable, a silhouette carved of purpose and power. I'm not afraid of the dark, she said, though her voice was smaller than she intended. You should be afraid of the quiet, he replied, stepping closer, close enough that the warmth of him brushed her skin. It's in the quiet that your fears sneak back in. Lyra's pulse jumped. She wanted to argue, to remind him that she could handle herself. But the memory of the council's eyes, the feel of Kale standing at her back during the confrontation, kept her tongue still. You've carried this for too long, he continued, his voice low, almost gentle. The exile, the whispers, the fear. You think the world can touch you now without breaking, but it can't. Not if you let it. Not if you hide. She shook her head, heart thundering. You don't understand. No one can. Kale tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then show me. Show me who you really are. The words were an invitation, a challenge, a promise. Lyra's hands trembled, but she didn't step back. Instead, she let the night air wrap around her, felt the weight of her wolf stirring just beneath her ribs, yearning to stretch its limbs in freedom. He watched her like he could see everything inside, and perhaps he did. Every scar, every memory, every flicker of fire she had tried to bury. The tension between them thickened, an invisible thread pulling tighter with each breath. I don't trust easily, she whispered, almost to herself. I know, Kale said softly, stepping even closer, close enough that the space between them crackled with unspoken energy. You should trust me, or leave. But you need to choose. And if you choose to stay, you choose more than yourself. You choose the storm with me. Her gaze dropped to the stone floor. The cold seeped into her bones, but his presence warmed the space around her. She wanted to run, wanted to deny the pull she felt toward him, yet she stayed. I don't know if I can, she admitted. Then let me help you, he said, his voice steady, patient, unwavering. I don't need you to be fearless. I need you to be honest. Lyra's breath hitched. She wanted to tell him everything, the fire, the exile, the nights she had spent running from herself, but words failed her. So she did the only thing she could. She nodded, small and hesitant. For a long moment, they stood there, the night holding its breath with them. The wind whispered around them, carrying the faint scent of pine and the faint silver glow of distant moonlight. Kale reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said. "Not from me. Not from your wolf. Not from yourself." She wanted to pull away, wanted to deny that a part of her, the part that had been lonely for years, hungered for this closeness. But she couldn't. She let her wolf stir, let it breathe in the night, let it acknowledge the presence of someone who might understand. "You make it sound so easy," she whispered, voice trembling. "It's never easy," he admitted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But nothing worth having ever is." Her eyes flicked up to his, and she saw something there she hadn't expected: patience, understanding, and a steady promise of protection that didn't smother. The storm inside her eased slightly, not gone, but quiet enough to listen. Kale's hand lingered near hers, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that space between them. She felt the weight of his gaze, the warmth of his presence, the pull of something ancient and inevitable. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured. Lyra's pulse raced. "Feel what?" "The bond. The way the flame recognizes you. The way the moon calls to your wolf." Her chest tightened. It was true. She felt it, the stirrings of something older than fear, older than exile, older than the world itself. She had been running for so long that she had forgotten the sensation of being seen, of being known. "I don't want to be just a weapon," she whispered. "You're not," he said firmly. "You're more than that. You're the fire that can light the way, not just for yourself, but for all of us. And I'll be there when the shadows come." Lyra's hands shook. The vulnerability, the raw honesty, the weight of the storm, and the bond between them pressed in, making her chest ache. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice small but steady. "I know," he said softly. "And that's why I need you to trust me. Not because I'm fearless, but because I choose to stand with you, even in fear." Her gaze softened, the tension in her body easing just slightly. She didn't step closer, not yet, but she didn't move away either. The silence between them was alive, charged with emotion, unspoken words, and possibilities. Outside, the moon peeked from behind a thin veil of cloud. Its silver light spilled across the terrace, catching the shimmer of her hair, the quiet fire in her eyes. The wolf inside her stretched, muscles coiling, heart pounding, yearning for the freedom it had been denied for so long. Kale's presence was steady, anchoring her, reminding her that she didn't have to run anymore. That she could trust, at least for now, that the storm outside wasn't the only danger. The storm inside could be tamed, shared, understood. Lyra swallowed hard, feeling a small spark of hope flicker. She would never be safe in the way most wanted her to be, and she would never be simple. But maybe, just maybe, she could be whole. And if she was going to face the fire, the prophecy, and the storms ahead, she wouldn't have to face them alone. Kale watched her quietly, waiting, giving her space, but never letting go of the unspoken thread between them. The tension remained, palpable and electric, but it no longer felt like fear. It felt like possibility. And in that fragile, fleeting moment, Lyra realized something she hadn't dared to admit in years. For the first time since her exile, she didn't want to run. Some connections burn brighter than fire itself. If your heart feels that pull, stay close. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every bond tells a story, and every story unfolds under the moon's gaze. The days that followed felt like walking through fog. The castle breathed around Lyra, corridors echoing with whispers, every shadow a watcher, every glance a judge. Even Kale moved with quiet vigilance, a sentinel at her side, yet he could not shield her from everything. The council had not forgotten her. Their anger simmered beneath polite bows and forced smiles. Every elder in the hall seemed to linger on her presence like a blade, testing, probing, waiting for the moment she would falter. Lyra felt it before she saw it. That familiar tension, the kind that raised the hair on her arms and made her wolf restless. Something was coming. And then it happened. The betrayal was subtle at first. A whispered warning from a guard, a glance from an elder, the careful placement of a dagger in a ceremonial room, all orchestrated so it would appear accidental. But Lyra felt it. Her instincts screamed something was off. She followed the thread of unease to the library, where Kale often met with advisors. She had intended to warn him, but as she entered, she saw him frozen, eyes sharp and fixed on a figure who shouldn't have been there. "Lyra," Kale said quietly, almost too late. "Step back." The council elder, Corin, stepped forward, his silver cloak brushing the floor. His eyes glimmered with triumph. "You thought you could walk in here without consequence," he sneered. "Do you know what the council has decided?" Lyra's chest tightened. Her pulse raced. "Decided what?" "That you are too dangerous to remain unbound. That your power, your bloodline, your presence will be contained." Kale's jaw tightened. "You dare touch her?" Corin smiled, a cold, sharp edge in his expression. "I dare do what is necessary to protect the pack." "Your affection blinds you, King. That is your weakness." Lyra's wolf stirred violently beneath her skin, coiling, ready to strike. The fire that had been smoldering for years flared higher, and she felt it itching at her fingertips, demanding release. "You won't touch me," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Not while I can stand." Kale stepped forward, a wall between her and the council. "Back away." But the elder was cunning. With a subtle hand motion, he activated a ward in the chamber, a magical seal that drained her strength, suppressing her power just enough to make her vulnerable. Lyra staggered, the heat in her veins dimming, her wolf growling, frustrated. The council stepped closer, confident. She could feel their fear, taste it in the air, and it fueled her anger. "You can't control me," she whispered through clenched teeth. "You never could." The room fell silent for a moment, charged with tension. Kale's eyes blazed with unspoken fury, but he stayed calm, waiting, letting her find the courage to act. Lyra clenched her fists, digging deep into the remnants of the silver flame that still pulsed beneath her skin. She wasn't fully in control yet, but she had enough. With a sharp breath, she summoned a flicker of her fire. It rippled like moonlight across the walls, and the ward faltered. The council gasped. They had not expected her to fight back. Kale stepped closer, his presence steadying her, his voice low and commanding. "Focus. Control it, Lyra. Don't let them define you." Her wolf growled, not in submission, but in readiness. Her silver flame rose again, small at first, then expanding, washing across the chamber. Every candle flickered violently, the torches dimmed, and the shadows of the council stretched and twisted against the walls. "You will not," Corin hissed, stepping back. Lyra raised her hands, feeling the ancient power of her bloodline pulse through her. "I am not your pawn. I am not your weapon. I am not your sacrifice." The words echoed, reverberating in the stone, carrying a weight the council hadn't anticipated. Some of the elders faltered. Fear replaced arrogance. Even Kale's usual restraint was tinged with awe. Lyra's heart pounded. The fire beneath her skin danced higher, bright enough to light the chamber like moonlight caught in flame. The energy was intoxicating, dangerous, alive, real. She had never felt so unrestrained yet so whole. Then Corin made a mistake. He lunged forward, reaching toward her, thinking the council's numbers would overpower her. Lyra's wolf roared. The silver flame erupted from her palms in a controlled surge of power, throwing him backward across the room. The council stumbled, some dropping to the floor in shock. Others shielded their faces as the chamber filled with light. Kale's eyes never left her. "Now," he said, voice low, calm but fierce. "Show them what happens when you are underestimated." Lyra breathed deeply, the silver fire pulsing rhythmically with her heartbeat. She wasn't just defending herself, she was claiming her power, staking her claim in a world that had never accepted her. When the flames settled, she was standing tall. Hands still glowing faintly, chest heaving, eyes burning with a fire that no one could deny. The council had retreated, some trembling, some glaring with fear, none willing to challenge her further tonight. Kale stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His hand brushed against hers, grounding her, steadying her storm. "You did it," he whispered. "You held your own." Lyra exhaled slowly, the tension finally releasing. I had to, she admitted. If I didn't, I'd still be running. You'll never have to run again, Kale said softly, his voice wrapping around her like a promise. Not with me. Not if you don't want to. Her heart throbbed, a mixture of relief, adrenaline, and something deeper, something warm and new. The bond between them had shifted. The storm of betrayal had tested her, but instead of breaking her, it had sharpened her. The silver flame within her settled, glowing faintly as if nodding in approval. Lyra understood, finally, that her power wasn't a curse. It was hers. Always had been. And now she would wield it, not in fear, but in choice. Outside, the night held its breath, quiet and expectant. Wolves howled in the distance, a chorus that seemed to celebrate her victory, echoing across the mountains. And far above, the moon shone down, witness to the girl who refused to bow and the Alpha King who had chosen to stand by her. The battle was far from over. The council had retreated, yes, but this was only the first test. Other forces, older and darker, would soon awaken. Yet Lyra no longer felt powerless. She was no longer just the outcast girl hiding in the shadows. She was the Silver Flame reborn. And with Kale at her side, she was ready for whatever the world would throw next. Betrayal tests the heart, but fire reveals the soul. If you felt the spark tonight, stay with us. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every shadow holds a story, and every story burns brighter beneath the moon. The air was electric the night Lyra stepped into the clearing beyond the castle walls. Moonlight spilled across the forest, painting the ground in silver and shadow. Every tree whispered in the wind, every leaf shimmered as if it knew what was coming. She could feel it in her bones, the moment of reckoning, the night when fear would no longer rule her. Kale walked beside her, silent, his presence like a shield of calm in the storm of her own nerves. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The bond between them pulsed, tethering her wolf and his alpha power together, steady and undeniable. Ahead, in the center of the clearing, the enemy waited. A rival alpha, dark and twisted, eyes glowing like embers in the night, surrounded by shadow wolves whose snarls rumbled in the chest like distant thunder. Their leader, a figure cloaked in night, sneered. So, the little silver flame dares to stand? Lyra's wolf stirred. Its muscles tensed, coiled, ready to spring. And this time, she did not suppress it. This time, she did not hide. You underestimated me once, she said, voice steady despite the fire licking at her chest. You won't again. Kale's hand brushed hers, a quiet, grounding touch. Remember your power, he whispered. Remember who you are. Lyra inhaled sharply, feeling the pulse of her inner wolf, the silver fire of her bloodline coiling beneath her skin. Her eyes glimmered with the same ancient light that had flared in the Hall of First Flame. She could feel it now, the strength, the history, the legacy of every wolf who had walked before her. The shadow alpha snarled and charged, the ground trembling under the weight of their claws. Lyra's wolf rose in unison with hers, a roar that split the night, echoing through the trees, calling to every wolf who recognized her scent, the scent of power, of destiny, of a fire that would not be contained. Silver light erupted from her hands, streaming upward like molten moonlight. The shadows hesitated, recoiling, but their leader pressed forward, confident in their numbers, in the darkness. You are not your fear, Kale said, his voice cutting through the night, steady and commanding. You are the flame that even darkness cannot consume. Lyra stepped forward, every step grounded in defiance. She let her power rise, let it flow through her like a river unbound. The silver flame surged, illuminating the trees, the clearing, the faces of every shadow wolf. They froze, unsure, unprepared for the intensity of a fire born from truth and choice. Her heart beat in rhythm with the pulse of the forest, with the moon above, with the wolf inside her. She was not afraid. Not this time. The shadow alpha lunged again. Lyra's hands flared, silver fire coiling into streams that struck out like living tendrils, pushing back the darkness. The ground shook as light and shadow collided. Wolves scattered, yelps and growls mixing with the roar of her wolf, the call of the moon, the heartbeat of her power. Kale moved beside her, calm, lethal, protective. His alpha presence blended with hers, a perfect harmony of fire and control. Together, they were unstoppable, a force the forest itself seemed to acknowledge. Lyra felt something ancient awaken inside her, a surge of strength and purpose she had never known. She was no longer the outcast girl hiding in shadows. She was the silver flame. She was the one they had feared. She was destiny walking. With a final surge of power, Lyra sent the Shadow Alpha crashing to the earth. His wolves fled, their howls trailing into the distance. The clearing fell silent, bathed in silver light, echoing with the memory of fire. She fell to her knees, exhausted but unbroken. The wolf inside her lowered its head, muscles relaxing, body still coiled with energy. Her chest heaved, eyes burning with triumph and release. Kale knelt beside her, one hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You did it," he whispered, pride and awe threading through his tone. "You faced it, and you didn't break." Lyra's voice was raw, trembling, yet filled with newfound strength. "I won't ever be their sacrifice again. Not for fear, not for prophecy, not for anyone." He lifted her chin with his fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Then we rise together," he said. "Whatever comes next, we face it as one. You are not alone." The moonlight bathed them, silver against silver, wolf and alpha, fire and storm, standing together. The forest seemed to breathe with them, leaves whispering, wind dancing, as if the world itself recognized the shift. Lyra's heart finally slowed, her power settling into a gentle, steady rhythm. She understood now, this was more than survival. This was claim, purpose, and the awakening of something greater than herself. The night held its breath with her. The enemy was vanquished, for now, but the echoes of prophecy, of destiny, and of power not yet fully understood would not be silenced. Yet Lyra was ready. She was no longer the girl who hid in the shadows. She was fire, silver, wolf, and heart. And she would not be denied. Some flames cannot be extinguished, no matter how dark the night. If your heart burns for stories of courage, love, and power, stay close. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every story ignites the soul, and every soul carries its own silver flame. The forest fell silent, save for the distant murmur of retreating wolves and the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. Lyra stood at the edge of the clearing, silver fire fading to a soft glow along her fingertips, her chest heaving from exertion and adrenaline. The moon above bathed her in pale light, casting long, shifting shadows that felt alive, as if the world itself was watching, waiting, questioning. Kale remained at her side, a steady presence against the storm of her emotions. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. Silence stretched between them, a fragile thread pulled taut with unspoken words, lingering danger and the weight of what had just occurred. Her gaze drifted across the clearing, the scorched marks of her power still lingered on the ground. For a moment, she felt the familiar sting of guilt, the whisper of doubt creeping into her mind. Am I a monster? Am I a threat? Kale's hand found hers, firm and grounding. Lyra, he said, voice low, steady, but carrying the intensity that always made her heart tremble. Look at me. She did. His eyes held no fear, no hesitation, only recognition. Understanding. Acceptance. And yet, there was a question there, heavy and urgent, like a challenge that only she could answer. You faced them, he continued, and you chose to rise. You didn't run. You didn't hide. But the question now, the real question, is, who do you choose to be? Lyra swallowed hard. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, muscles coiled, senses alive. The power inside her still pulsed, fierce and untamed. And yet, in that moment, she realized it wasn't about the council, the prophecy, or even the rival alpha she had just faced. It was about herself. She felt Kale's hand tighten around her slightly. The world will fear you. Some will want to control you. Others will want you gone. But you have a choice. Stand with me. Stand for yourself. Or walk away into the shadows alone. Her breath hitched. The enormity of his words pressed against her chest like the weight of a storm. She had spent her life running from fear, from judgment, from power she didn't understand. And now, for the first time, she was being offered the chance to own it and to share it, not with the world, but with someone who saw her fully, without fear or condemnation. The wind shifted, brushing her hair against her cheeks. She could feel the pulse of the silver flame inside her, rhythmic and steady, calling out for choice, for action, for declaration. She felt her wolf, quiet but awake, watching, waiting. And she realized she was not afraid. Not of power. Not of destiny. Not of herself. Kale's voice cut through the quiet once more, soft but unwavering. Will you stand with me, Lyra? Will you let them define you, or will you define yourself? Her heart thundered. Every instinct, every emotion, every pulse of energy surged through her. And in that instant, she made a choice. I stand, she said, voice strong, trembling, radiant with newfound certainty. I stand. With you. With my power. With myself. Kale's lips curved into a rare, faint smile, the storm behind his eyes softening for a heartbeat. Then let them come, he whispered. We face them together. And as their hands intertwined, the forest around them seemed to exhale, leaves rustling in approval, the moonlight shining brighter through the mist, the silver fire of Lyra's bloodline settling into a steady, unwavering glow. Yet even in that fragile moment of victory, the shadows lingered. A whisper stirred from the darkness beyond the trees, low and ancient, carrying the weight of secrets long buried. She is not the only one, the voice seemed to hiss, curling into the night like smoke on the wind. Lyra's pulse quickened, a shiver running down her spine. Kale's hand tightened over hers, grounding her again, steadying her against the pull of the unknown. Whatever comes, he said quietly, we face it together. But the wind carried the echo of prophecy, of danger yet to awaken, of forces older than any pack, older than the mountains themselves. The choice she had made tonight was only the beginning. And in the distant shadows, unseen eyes watched her every move, calculating, waiting, judging. The moon hung low, heavy, like an omen above the mountains. Its silver light spilled across the forest, catching on the edges of Lyra's hair, the silver traces of her power, the subtle shimmer of Kale's alpha presence. Together, they stood at the edge of the clearing, poised between triumph and the unknown. Beneath them, the earth seemed to tremble faintly, a subtle pulse that whispered of forces slumbering deep beneath the mountains, forces older than prophecy, older than flame. The silver fire in Lyra's veins answered that pulse, flickering with recognition, and her wolf stirred, tense and ready. From the shadows, a voice hissed, low, dangerous, impossibly ancient. She is not the only one. The true alpha has not yet risen. Lyra stiffened. Kale's hand found hers, his presence solid and grounding, but even he could not mask the weight of the warning. The wind shifted, carrying leaves and whispers and the distant howl of wolves that had seen centuries pass. A storm was coming, one far greater than any council or rival alpha. A storm that would test the limits of her power, her heart, and her bond with Kale. And yet, she did not flinch. The fire in her chest glowed steady, her wolf alert but controlled, her courage unwavering. Whatever the darkness beyond the moonlit horizon, she would meet it. She would not run. She would not hide. She would rise. Kale's voice was soft, but resolute, carrying over the quiet of the forest. Whatever comes, Lyra, we face it together. Lyra's eyes met his. In that gaze, she found strength, promise, and a defiance that could not be broken. The night waited, holding its breath, and in the hush of possibility, the future began to shift. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the world began to stir, because the silver flame was awake, and destiny, at last, had chosen its fire. Some stories are born in fire, tested in shadow, and written beneath the moon. If your heart beats for legend, love, and destiny, stay with us. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every story burns and every flame tells its own tale.